Bitcoin will bring peace to Earth. I just see Bitcoin as the foundation layer for the monetary system to bring integrity into that aspect of life. We need sound money that is authentic and transparent and honest. When we want to have a healthy economy, we have Bitcoin. When we want to have a healthy relationship, we have nonviolent communication. When I discovered Bitcoin and realized what it really was, it was that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is truly life-changing. I think proof of work used to be common in our world. Everything only came by proof of work back in the day. And now that we have the disposable society, they're easy come, easy go. If I want to donate to a project or to something fantastic that I see happening in the world, I can just do it with no middleman, no intermediary, no need to ask permission. I just see Bitcoin as the foundation layer for the monetary system to bring integrity into that aspect of life on Earth. And then I see NVC as a foundational tech for a communication system to bring peace and harmony amongst individuals and even amongst nations as a potential way forward for that.
For people who don't know, what is NVC? I also heard it the first time ever when I researched about you and when you right now told me about that.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So NVC stands for Nonviolent Communication. It's funny because we've got BTC for Bitcoin, although I don't like saying that because that's like the kind of the asset class, and I just think of it more as money. But yes, so NVC. So there's a man named Marshall Rosenberg who grew up in Detroit in, I guess, the 50s, and he experienced the race riots that happened there, and then he himself, so he was, observed those. He wasn't attacked himself, but his family, had to stay indoors during those few days that was going on. And he was a sort of a young boy at that point, I guess. I'm not sure, like 10 or 11 or something. And then later on in school, he experienced a lot of attacks, physical and verbal, because he was Jewish and he was not seen favorably by the other kids. And so all of these things kind of really touched his heart as a kid, and he just wanted to understand why people attack other people because they're different in some way. And it led him on a long journey. He ended up becoming a clinical psychologist, thinking, that would help him to sort of understand human nature and help people who were struggling. He sort of realized along the way that people that hurt people are hurt, like hurt people, right? And I mean, nowadays that seems sort of almost cliche and it's so obvious and we all know it. But back then, in the 50s and 60s, that was still all being kind of unraveled and sort of discovered and looked at and thought about if for the first time, really. Or it was in the early days of all of that sort of exploration. So he thought, well, if he could understand people and understand why they do the things they do, and, he could help them to heal and therefore they wouldn't hurt other people and help bring sort of more peace to Earth, which was really his underlying longing, I suppose you could say. And then through the work of being a clinical psychologist, he kind of realized that labeling people doesn't necessarily help them. And he just noticed some of the downfalls of that system. And so at a certain point, he quit that career and he went and spoke to people, I believe all over the world, or in many places, I should say. And he really looked for people who had been through very, very dramatic trauma and had managed to stay connected to their heart, connected to a sense of optimism and positivity, as opposed to the people that he had observed either in his practice or in life that had been hurt and had become very angry, violent, bitter, and resentful as a result of it, somehow like disconnected from their heart and their sense of optimism and hope, and from humanity in a sense, and became more and more violent. And he wanted to understand why those that stayed connected, like how they could have, like what was that sort of, he wanted to see if there was a common denominator, some sort of a magic touch that they'd had or experienced, or what it was that allowed them. And what he found was that just this is, I suppose you could say, empirical, through talking through to many, many individuals, that the people who'd been through a lot of trauma and stayed connected had all had someone in their early lives who had been able to hold a space of presence for them, had just been able to be there and not judge them, not try and fix them as such, but like listen to them, let them express themselves, and just what he later developed was, empathy, like the way of being empathic to someone, no matter what they're going through, but without feeling like you've got to fix their pain or take their pain away, but just allow them to experience whatever it is they're going through and be there for them. And that seemed to be that having had that experience had given people some like inner touch point, I suppose, where they were able to stay connected. And I'm just, paraphrasing, and of course, always do your own research and so on. But like I've this is what I've learned and read, and I've been in workshops and 10-day retreats and things with him when he was alive. So we definitely heard a lot of stories, and that was the general overview. And so then what he continued to do then was just sort of develop this way of holding that sort of space of presence with people. And I will say, observing him do that was a very profound experience for me. Like, he would invite people to come up in the front of the room and sit with him and talk about anything that was, going on for them, and generally, things that were difficult or devastating. And he just had this way of being so absolutely present and connected. It was profound to sort of observe and be in that space. He didn't even say anything. He was just there, but it was so, it was deep. I don't know how to really put it into words. And the people often cried, they made connections without him having to even say stuff. They would just realize things. And then occasionally, he would act as the other party of like role play, the person maybe that had hurt this person, and he would say things from a healed perspective, right? And yeah, there was just very profound forgiveness, connection, understanding, release, relief, and healing that happened in those spaces. So yeah, that was a big part of the process. And then, he actually developed a 4-step process that is known as nonviolent communication. But one has to always be careful not to get hung up on the 4 steps. I'll say what they are in a minute, but it's just because they are like the formal version of nonviolent communication. So you use them when you're struggling emotionally and all kind of messed up and just grasping. And you come up for air, and you can take yourself through the 4 steps, but you don't want to sort of converse with other people in that formal way, because it will sound weird and they'll think that you're just doing some psychobabble. But what it is like, when you're struggling, when someone's really upset you, let's say, or a situation or an event has happened and you feel very upset or angry or scared or frustrated about it, you can use these 4 steps. So the first step would be, you look for the observation, like, what is it that you saw or that you heard that is the trigger for your response or your reaction, right? So you act like a video camera would. What do you see or what do you hear, without any opinions or judgments or labels or diagnoses? And then once you've got that clear, you ask yourself, okay, so how am I feeling? And you name the feelings that you're experiencing. And then you ask yourself, what am I needing? And so the needs are like the human values, like our deepest needs. There's a list that we work with. It's not definitive, but it is pretty well sort of agreed upon at this point by thousands of people who've been through the process. And I've taught many, many workshops, and I always hand out the needs list and say, Can any of you say something on this list that you've never ever wanted or could never imagine wanting? And I've literally never had anybody, come up with anything. So we sort of agree that this is a universal list. And I mean, it includes things like everything you need for physical survival, for physical well-being, comfort, ease, choice, autonomy. Under autonomy, you would have choice, you would have freedom, independence. We have a need for integrity, authenticity, honesty. We have a need for meaning, challenge, competence, creativity, discovery. We have needs for openness, for reassurance, for respect, for, stability, to hear and to be heard, to be seen, to understand. We have needs for cooperation. So all of these things are just very basic sort of human, you can call them desires, values, needs. And once you establish what needs were not met by what that other person or situation did or said, then you can move on to making a request. And that's the fourth step. And the request is something that you can ask of yourself to do to meet your needs, or you can ask it of the other person that's directly involved, or sometimes you might want to rather ask someone who's not involved to help you meet whatever need it is or needs. So those are the four steps, and they can get used in different ways. And yeah, so I guess that was a long-winded, but a sort of an overview of what nonviolent communication is. And then, you know, it's changed. It changed my life, my husband's life, our children. Raising them with this consciousness was very, very life-changing for us, and has allowed us to have incredible relationships. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there because I know I've been going on. But
It's
I
great.
hope that gives you, an overview, and I'm of course happy to hear any questions or clarifications or anything that you require.
I think it's a really great method. I never heard about it, so I think I will go down a deeper rabbit hole there later
Mm-hmm.
on. But it's something really interesting to think about, having a process. Like, obviously, if you're any human being that is on Earth for any period of
Mm-hmm.
time, you probably encountered difficulties in your life. You probably encountered anger, sadness, whatever it is, with
Yep.
someone else in your life, and you developed some things, hopefully, to cope with that, and hopefully the deal you cope with that is something healthy for you and not
Yep.
destructive. I think
Exactly.
that a lot of people have destructive behaviors if they're in anger or sadness.
Yep.
And I definitely worked a lot on that topic with my girlfriend, and being as constructive and good as possible in difficult times. It's easy to
Mm-hmm.
be together if everything is fine, but like the hard times define a character the most, I feel like,
Yep.
how strong it is and stuff like that. The question I now have, as we're on a Bitcoin podcast, how correlated is that sound communication, that non-violent communication, with sound money, with Bitcoin? What's the connection? What's the correlation there you see? And maybe I'll ask that later, but just to note it here, would sound money also encourage more
Mm-hmm.
and better communication? That's kind of where
Mm-hmm.
I go with that question.
I love that question. Okay, so I guess we can go to that one afterwards, though, like you said. And I guess just to clarify for the listeners that there will be an article coming out. I don't know if you recorded that part at the beginning, so I just will say, this Log 5 of Stack Chain magazine that's about to be shipped out. There's going to be an article in there on this whole topic, and then there'll be an expanded version of that article on my website as well. Yeah, so when I discovered nonviolent communication, oh gosh, 20 years ago now, a little more, I felt the same way as when I discovered Bitcoin and realized what it really was, right? Of course, like everybody, I didn't realize right away, but when I realized, it was that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is truly life-changing. And this is a technology that, and I mean technology even with regards to nonviolent communication, because language is a technology, that if the world could be on this standard, so to speak, we would have far, far, far more peace on Earth than we do now amongst individuals, communities, families, towns, nations. So I guess, there's been a part of me since I was a kid who's always really, really longed to find and engage in ways that bring more peace to Earth. It's just been a very profound longing for me. And when I discovered nonviolent communication, I had that sense. And then when I discovered Bitcoin, I had that sense from, obviously a different angle, but that same like, oh my God, this is foundational. The world needs this. And like when you said sound money, to me, there's sound money and there's sound communication. Money is transaction between individuals. It's agreements between us. It's, offering my value for your value. And sound communication is also communication, and it is transaction of words, thoughts, and feelings between individuals. And it's, yeah, I see what you just pulled up. That's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Yeah,
give it as a context for those who also have the visual in front of them, or people that
that's
now
brilliant.
just listen to it. You can pull out your phone and maybe look at it to see some of the things there. I'm a visual guy, so so I
Yes.
always need the visuals to it, and I can better feel it. But I just wanted to did not intend to interrupt you. Sorry.
No problem. No, I'm glad. I'm glad. This is fantastic. Yeah, and it's perfect. I'm reading through it. It's all absolutely on point. So, yeah, with sound communication, that's a transaction. Where every time we speak or say something or listen to someone, we're transacting with our energy, with our attention. And I think that just as we need sound money that is authentic and transparent and honest, we need the same in our communication if we want to have healthy relationships. So, when we want to have a healthy economy, we have Bitcoin. When we want to have a healthy relationship, we have nonviolent communication or some other form. I mean, there are others. I will say that when we found this, it was because we were very much needing, my husband and I were both had, spiritual sort of awarenesses. I'll just leave it at that, of how, of a connection to higher power. And we wanted to live that truth and that beauty with our children. And then for anybody who's had children, you realize like, oh my, this is a whole different ball game. How do I do this? How do I live the compassion and the love and the peace that I want to live with my children when they're, acting out or not doing what I want or just being their wonderful, very extremely individualistic and individual selves. And so that is what really drove us to look for something. And we did find other methods that I will say are great, but they just didn't work for us and our family the way this did. So I just want to say that, because I'm not saying that nonviolent communication is the only way, whereas I do think at this point that Bitcoin is the only way, personally. Yeah. So yeah, I think the crossover is that it's a foundational technology for humans to interact with regards to their communication. And then, like I said before, which I'm not sure if you're recording, there's a lot of different similarities. Like they're both born out of pain, right? Satoshi, as far as we know, he kind of told us what why he was creating Bitcoin in the first paragraph of the white paper, and also in the writing in the Genesis block. And so it was clearly like out of this frustration with the financial system. And Marshall created nonviolent communication out of frustration with the communication system. And my article goes into some of the ways that we communicate and language that we use that leads to disconnection rather than connection. Like just an example is deserve, the word deserve, or deserve-oriented thinking. When we think someone deserves punishment, it actually makes it enjoyable to mete out that punishment because we think we're like doing this good thing. And that can be very tragic because our thought about what someone deserves is like putting us in the position of God, saying, you deserve good and you deserve bad. And we are not that. That's not up to us. Now, that's not to say we don't protect ourselves if someone is acting out and trying to hurt us. Marshall never, ever suggested just laying down and letting someone hurt you. But protective use of force is very different than violent and aggressive use of force. So yeah, there's many rabbit holes one can go down, but I'll stop there. So yeah, being born out of pain, it's both a system of rules, not rulers, with nonviolent communication and with Bitcoin. You just understand that we transact on a level playing field here, and that's very different than using language that powers over somebody, or using a financial system where you've got the Cantillon effect. They're both decentralized, excuse me, and they both rely on voluntary participation and collaboration.
Super
They're
interesting.
Yeah, they both use proof of work and have low time preference built in. It takes a lot of time and energy to understand each of these systems, to be willing to do the work for the rewards at the end. And so you're like with with nonviolent communication, it takes, well, I'd say at least a couple of years. I mean, unless you're an incredibly enlightened human being. I considered myself pretty aware and conscious, and I was astonished at how much we call it jackal in NVC, jackal language, jackal thoughts, judgments, blame, shame, guilt, was built into my worldview without me realizing it, and built into my language and into my thoughts about people. And it took a lot of work and journaling and going through the book and the workbook and writing down the answers to like retrain my neural pathways and to understand and view things differently. So yeah, I can go on, but I'll stop there because there are more similarities, and they will all be listed in the article.
It's also interesting when you think about the judgmental thoughts that you have, and the things that you then go ahead and actually say. If you really want to clean out your thoughts, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Some you have thoughts in your head because maybe someone angers you or someone triggers you or annoys you, but then you're disciplined enough to still be nice to that person in that situation, just because it would you don't want to escalate it or like whatever the thing is. So sometimes we have darker thoughts then come, like there's a filter between our thoughts and the things that we actually say, and filtering out what you say and what you do is great, and is also already very hard. But then filtering out your thoughts and the judgmental things that you have in your mind is like, oh my, what does he do here? Like if he's doing something very small that is completely normal, but it's annoying you because it's not aligned with how you think the world is working, but it's aligned with like law and moral things. It's just like a you thing. You might think like, asshole, like go away. But that there's a discipline in there's like, you should not say that. So clearing out those thoughts, I imagine being really, really hard. I catch myself and I notice that where I'm like saying in my head mean things about other people, and later I'm like, I'm so glad I never said that out loud.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I'd like to clarify a couple of things. So Marshall used the jackal and the giraffe just as symbols, and he actually used to use puppets. He's amazing to watch, in my opinion. He's so he had such a dry sense of humor, and he was someone that you could tell he had been through a lot. You could tell that this was work for him to to do all of this. It wasn't just, ah, la, la, look at this, everybody, just do this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it was profound. So he used the jackal as a symbol for our judgments, our unleashed anger, frustrations that were our unconscious, just habitual reactive side. And then he used the giraffe as the symbol for our more conscious, aware, sort of using the prefrontal cortex, our reason, our empathy, our compassion side. And with regards to what you're saying, he never suggested that it was even possible to fully remove. So I'm saying this, sorry, because I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that we can completely remove the judgmental thoughts, that they're just no longer there at all. The different, and I actually said to him, I asked him this question at one of the 10-day retreats. I said, Marshall, are you telling us that you no longer ever have any judgments in your mind? And he laughed and he's like, oh no, hell no. He's like, I still have them. He said the difference, and this is the profound part, the difference is how little time I spend with those thoughts compared to how much time I used to spend with them. So what he does now is or did and taught us to do, and I would say at this point, I mean, yeah, with it's been many years of practice. It's pretty works for me this way now as well. I spend very little time. So I still have those thoughts, but almost immediately I can find that place of compassion, because what you do is you try and guess what need that other person is meeting in this moment, behaving the way they're behaving. And what Marshall told us, and what I, in my experience, agree with and understand, is that everybody is always doing the best they can. So that means that with their resources, inner and outer, whether that's education, health, wealth, environment, family, upbringing, worldview, everything that they've been programmed with by the society, the grace some people have had to do some inner work and not lash out, whereas other people haven't received that blessing. And, it's hard because we can say, oh, well, everyone could do it. But if you don't know you have a choice, then do you really have a choice? So I don't know, I have compassion because I think a lot of people, they don't have whatever it takes to do that inner work. And so even if they're lashing out and doing horrible things, I can hate their actions, but I can still have compassion for the hurt human who's carrying out those actions as someone who doesn't know a better way, right? So, I mean, it's a big topic, and I guess there's a lot of philosophical ways you could go with all that. But the bottom line, to respond to what you said, is that those thoughts don't just disappear, but instead of harboring on them or constantly in your mind seeing that person as an enemy or a bad person or labeling them as an idiot, and then you still act nice because we're sort of social beings and we don't want to, like you say, escalate it. But in our mind, we continue carrying this label, or what Marshall would call the enemy image of that other person. We actually shift it within us so that we open up a different energy channel between us and that person. And it's quite remarkable, actually. You could try it sometime, or the listeners, if you're like at the grocery store or in line or in traffic somewhere and someone is, taking way longer, or they cut you off in traffic or whatever. Well, it helps, I suppose, if you can watch their reactions afterwards. But so if you're somewhere and someone is doing something and they're just pissing you off and you're just super annoyed and calling them all kinds of names, step back for a moment and just think, I wonder, what need they're meeting or what they're going through right now. Like, maybe they're having a really rough day. Maybe they just got some of the worst news of their life. We don't know, right? And you'll notice both within you, this internal softening and the shift. And often it's quite amazing, but you'll notice a softening and a shift in the other person without even you saying a word. And they might change their behavior. They might like look up and look at you different or almost surprised because they feel something and they don't know what's going on, but something has shifted in the energy between you. And yeah, so there's many profound ways and reasons to work with the judgments that we have of people in our own minds. And to also, like Marshall said, they're not going to go away. He said, if they're really bad, what you could do is get a piece of paper and just write them all down. Use all your worst language, just let it rip, no filter, give yourself license to just like fully lay it all down there. And then go through the process of, wow, okay, what am I really needing in this situation? And usually you find feelings that are uncovered that are more vulnerable as well. Once you get through the anger, anger usually is covering up more vulnerable feelings.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece, and make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure. It's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty. Writing down things is such an amazing life hack.
Yes.
like I unfortunately don't do it on a regular basis. But if I know I have like a hard phase right now, like there's like a bad month, like a lot of things come together, I start to journal. And just that one small action of like once a day you journal, or you have like that routine in there, it helps you a lot. Like it's just like the same thoughts that are in there, just like writing it down. That's one thing that I have found that helped me a lot with those thoughts. So also really interesting when we think about all those interactions we can have in our daily lives, where something comes up to you that you didn't wish for, you didn't plan for, but I just had that the other day. I was in the train, and there's a guy coming in, and he's taking all the magazines from the train, and was very unpolitely speaking with everyone. He might was just on drugs, he might was alcoholic. It was definitely very far away from any normal behavior. And the only thought that I actually had in my mind was like that. First of all, like I will get my girlfriend next to me, so like
Uh-huh.
I'm between him because I'm 2 meters, so I'm less likely to to be
Yeah.
hit at. There's like this physical protection thing going
Yeah.
on, but the main part, because I never felt really threatened or anything. I think he was not really violent; he was just seeking for attention.
Mm-hmm.
But the real fear was like, I feel a lot of sadness right now for him. I feel a lot of compassion for him, because in for a person to act like that
Mm-hmm.
means he needs a lot of attention. He might go through a really rough time. Like,
Yeah.
we always think we go through a rough time, but then you see someone else who actually goes through a really rough time, and you're like, oh, like, my life is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that perspective helps a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting how it goes, and with that, maybe anchoring in the sound money conversation also is, how do you think, if we actually are on a Bitcoin standard, if we actually are on a, maybe just call it sound money standard, I think
Yeah.
it will be Bitcoin, but let's just keep it at first principles, sound money standard,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone can save, and all the low time preference things that we hope come from that. How will it actually make a difference in our communication, in our everyday lives? We all say also a lot like Bitcoin is unfunding wars, like defunding
Mm-hmm.
wars.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also defunding aggression in communication and violence in communication?
I would say yes, absolutely, because I think a lot of the disconnection, the pain, the anger, the frustration that gets played out in people's lives and then in their relationships and then between nations is because it's all a spectrum, right? Violence is violence all the way from the personal to the nation state. And nation states are just made up of people anyway. So I think that once we have sound money and, oh, sorry. So to finish my thought. So a lot of that violence that gets played out is from literal stress and fear. And that stress and fear is often because people do not know how they are going to survive, sometimes next month, never mind in their retirement. So whether it's the people that are living under the poverty line and literally don't know how to bring themselves up and also don't know how to pay rent next month, that creates a level of stress in somebody's being that gives them a very short rope, that when they are interacting with their partners or their children, they don't have much patience because that stress, I mean, stress is literally, the amygdala, our dinosaur brain, at the base of the skull. When that thing triggers and releases catecholamines and adrenaline and so on. Those are actual drugs. They're natural. They're in our body, but they have the effect of flooding our system and of cutting us off from our prefrontal cortex. I mean, on a biological level, right? And so people don't have the ability to communicate slowly, clearly, compassionately, or in a connected manner because they're not even connected with themselves at that point. And so I think having a sound money system will just, when our savings mean something and when the value, never mind deflation, never mind prices going down, how about just prices being stable and knowing that the money you earn is actually going to cover your bills next month and next year. And then, of course, being able to plan for your retirement and so on. These things are so fundamental because our core needs are our survival needs. Before we have all those other needs that I was talking about earlier, just physical shelter, food, clean air, clean water. Those are number one because without those, none of the rest matters, right? So when we have those, and then you can kind of extrapolate this whole thing into the healthcare system and all of that, which of course is big in the news right now in this country after what happened the other day. But so people's health, and having the ability to know that if you get sick, you're actually going to be able to afford your care will greatly relieve people, and that relief will translate into the way people feel, and the way they feel will translate into how they communicate. So very basic stuff, but I think it will make a massive, massive difference and will greatly enhance connection and communication. Well, I could stop. There is more I would like to say real quick on that, but do you want to say something first?
Oh no, like go on.
Okay. So that all said, I've been doing a little thought experiment with myself since writing this article. If I had to choose one, if I had to choose NVC or Bitcoin, and I could only choose one, which one do I think would ultimately be the most impactful and have the biggest chance of bringing the most peace? And I actually, maybe you can ponder this with me, but I haven't found the solution or haven't chosen one, because as I was just saying, if we have sound money, we will naturally have better communication, I believe. Because a lot of bad communication comes from stress, right? And fear. And on the other hand, if we have NVC spread throughout the world and people communicate with each other with respect, with authenticity, with compassion and clarity and presence, then if that was spread around the world, I don't even think the fiat system would even exist. I think then we would naturally find another system to transact with, because fiat is such a lie. And if you have a system of communication that's based on honesty and integrity, you couldn't have a system of transaction that was based on lies and power over strategies and the Cantillon effect. So I think, honestly, either one, and that to me shows how profound both of these things are. I think either one, if you had to only choose one, would actually naturally lead to the other one. And the last thing I'll say on that is that I think Bitcoin has a better chance at being the one that gets furthest quickest, because nonviolent communication has been around since I think it probably got popular in the 80s, I would say. Marshall started kind of formulating and working with it and spreading it sort of by himself between the 60s, 70s. And then he slowly, he formed the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And then he started training other people to train people and so on and so forth. And the Center for Nonviolent Communication still exists. And I highly recommend anybody checks that website out. There's tons of free resources available. But it's been however many years, 40 years, 50 years, and it's still very small and niche. Whereas Bitcoin has been 15 years and it's already pretty much everybody knows the word, even if they don't understand it yet. And I think that's because, money is what we all use. Well, we communicate every day as well, but I don't know, we're sort of addicted to money in a sense, an unhealthy addiction, but...
It is. It's a thing that I'm also curious with Nostra about, if it actually has the power to push through that. Because what Bitcoin does is the most complicated thing on earth, breaking up the central bank and financial system, central bank system and financial system in general. But it will do that because every player has an incentive to join. Like the Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO, one of the richest guys alive, such an influential figure, has the same incentive to join Bitcoin, the network, as a struggling mother of 5 kids without a man. No matter what demographic you choose, no matter what person you choose in this world, everyone has a major incentive to join Bitcoin, and a direct incentive. Like, you join the network, after 4 years, you already see a lot of results. You might even see the results after 4 months already. And direct, measurable success of that. And that's where I think, because NVC is longer there and I just discovered it, I actually noticed that when I saw the slides, it looked familiar. I think I learned about it, I think a few years ago. We made some courses outside of school, but related to school, where we learned about that actually. We made a one-day trip, and I think it was one part of that. So when I saw the slides and
Okay.
when I saw that, it looked familiar to me again.
Uh-huh.
So that's really interesting. But it's still like not everyone is in on there. And I think Bitcoin already achieved so much in 15 years because it has that incentive. Like, we are greedy people
Yes.
and we want more and more, and we want more Bitcoin. And so we have the incentive to understand the technology and get really good in it. So I'm 100% agreeing with you, where when everyone is communicating in a really good way, like sound communication, like NVC, I think that would lead to Bitcoin. But NVC lacks the financial incentive to
Yep.
spread like wildfire. And
Yeah.
that's why I think Bitcoin is already so far down the rabbit hole of breaking up that central bank system and getting into everyone's head. Like, we have countries now buying Bitcoin. It's a
Yep.
crazy time to be alive because there's this incentive there. And that's why I tend towards Bitcoin being more important. But it's, I'm cautiously saying that because Bitcoin in the end of the day is just money,
Yes.
and money is a tool, and a tool should not be the most important thing in your life. So
Well, that, and also because, okay, so now we've all got, everybody's getting all their their financial needs met, and they're having some financial freedom. Okay, great. But now you're still going to wake up next to that same person in bed if you're married, or, talk to your same kids every day. And like, yes, so maybe there's some more ease in your family life because you're not stressed about how you're going to pay the rent, but you still are having communication. And when you start working with NVC and you realize, or you maybe don't even need to work with it, if you just think about yourself and your communication methodologies or the relationships you have with people around you, because there's lots of very wealthy people, they've got lots of money, they're not worrying about how to pay the rent, they don't have financial stress, and yet they've got horrible relationships. So is that really, and that's why people always say money, doesn't buy happiness. No, because in the end, what really brings you happiness is ultimately, at the end of the day, we always hear this from people looking back on their lives, it's the relationships that you had and the measure of like the levels of creativity you were able to bring to life, and connection and joy and peace with the people around you every day. So in that sense, yes, I think I'm back with you. Like, it's cautious to say that, okay, if we had to choose one, I think we just need both, basically.
and we can
And,
have both.
and we can, and that's the beauty. We don't have to choose one. And on the measure of incentives, that's interesting what you were saying. I agree. And I think what it is too, as you were speaking, something came up for me that I hadn't fully thought through yet. And that's that another reason I think Bitcoin is going to be more effective more quickly, and is already being more effective more quickly, is because, because it gives you, sorry, I'm just losing my thread here. I was like all in it a moment ago.
I have that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'm like, I have that great question. And then in the middle of asking a question, I'm like, where was I going with that? I'm just like ending the question somewhere else. Like,
Oh
you're
my.
talking to a guy that does that every day. That happens to me a lot. And it's
Which is
super interesting
incredibly
because
impressive, by the
yeah,
way.
and sometimes, like, I mean, I hope people don't notice that too much, but sometimes the guest stops talking, and I don't know where to start, and I just start
Uh,
somewhere, and by the starting of the a sentence of the question, I don't know where I end up. Usually I
That's so,
know it, but
yeah.
there's like this 1% of questions that I asked where I didn't knew in the starting where I will end up with.
Where it just becomes a flow. That's great. That's like the flow in the moment. And often that stuff is so valuable too, right? We go places that are unplanned, and that ends up being where the gold or the Bitcoin is.
And I think that's what people really like, the authenticity of it, where
Yes.
it's not scripted. Because
Yes.
I don't know, maybe people don't know about that in the podcast, but I don't share any questions before because I don't have
No,
any
you
questions
don't.
before that.
Oh, amazing.
and
Okay. I love it.
and we don't like, there's no script going on. I had Michael Saylor on, and I thought he's always so well spoken and he's always so well prepared. So I thought like maybe he wants to have questions before, and I
Uh-huh.
asked his assistant, does he want to have questions before? Should we talk about what's the topic on the podcast? And she just said like, no.
Amazing.
He
Yeah.
doesn't want to know what you will ask him.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to know what will ask him. He can handle your questions.
Yeah.
We just went into the podcast, and
Love
yes, he
it.
was well spoken and extremely well prepared, even though he had no clue who am I and
Yeah.
no clue what I will ask. And so I approach every podcast like that. Sometimes I always write down like 5 to 10 questions, topics that I want to get into. But usually I never get to all of them anyway.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I usually drift off somewhere, like, no, like I
Yeah.
drove to. So sorry to interrupt so long, but it's just like, I really like conversations. That's
Yeah.
what I saw when like focused conversations between two people actually paying attention to each other is so
Yes.
rare these days, that
Yes.
podcasting is the one place where I really like that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so beautiful about your podcasts is you can tell, one can tell, at least that's I could tell that that there's a genuine conversation going on. And yes, I can verify it's totally unscripted. I did not receive any questions either.
Absolutely.
Oh, and
Did I
I just
distract you enough further from the thread, or did you catch it?
I did. I caught it. I did. So because Bitcoin is about money, and because our core needs of survival are so critical before anything else. We need the money to work, and I think that's what it is. Because when in the communication, we all need that to work, but it's not as critical to our literal survival. It's critical to what I call our thrival. There's survival needs and there's thrival needs, is the way I see it. And survival needs, as I've said, are food, water, shelter, air, warmth. That's survival needs. Thrival needs is everything else: harmony, love, connection, creativity, joy, peace, challenge, fitness, etc., etc. I mean, fitness could go between both, but yeah. So the survival needs, because they're the most critical, they relate in our world today for most people to money. There's very few people out there surviving completely without any money. Very, 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 very few, right? And so I think that's it. Money just fulfills that so that's why people are going to be attracted first. Like you said, we're greedy, but I don't know even that we're greedy. It's just an actual money is a strategy to meet the need for survival. And because
Uh,
survival is the most core and most critical need before we can attend to any of the others, money becomes the tool and the strategy that we're most interested in. And there's another little piece to this, is Bitcoin is actually, we talk about proof of work and low time preference, and both of those are very true and very relevant. At the same time, if you're lucky and like you get into Bitcoin at the beginning or near the beginning or during a bull run, it's not a lot of low time preference that's needed. Really, the low time preference is needed during the bear market, right? And so for all and also because most people get in for the first time during a bull run, right? That's well known. is that the masses always join, the new masses come into Bitcoin during a bull run, because that's when the excitement and the hype is there, and that's when numbers going up. And so it actually doesn't take as much proof of work initially to get into Bitcoin. Whereas with nonviolent communication, it takes proof of work from the very beginning. And this was what I was actually trying to grasp earlier that I lost. This fascinates me because I'd never thought about it before. Because one of the reasons I stopped teaching in an active way, nonviolent communication, was because I got frustrated with having people come to a 2 or 3 day workshop and be so excited and so passionate and so into what we were doing and what they were learning. And then that was it. They just thought their life should change, and no one wanted to put in the proof of work, which includes reading, listening, watching videos, journaling, attending weekly practice groups that are free. Like, they didn't have to be with me. My first practice group, me and other people just formed together out of the workshop, and we didn't, there was no one being paid or nothing. We just were obsessed and we wanted to learn more, and we used books and videos to teach ourselves and to discuss it amongst each other. But that takes a lot of time and energy. Every single week for almost 10 years, I was part of a practice group on a weekly basis and then I was leading my own as well. But so I'm just going like, that's another reason that Bitcoin has been adopted more rapidly than nonviolent communication, is because nonviolent communication actually requires immense amounts of proof of work right from the get-go.
97, because I studied these numbers when I started and did the podcast, 97% of all podcasts stop after the third episode.
Wow.
So like 97% of all podcasts start with one
Yep.
episode and never make it to the fourth episode.
Wow.
And 99% of the podcasts stop after 20 episodes. So if you are making a podcast with 21 episodes, you are already in the top 1% of all podcasts.
Wow.
So, and I noticed that. Even in the
Yes.
Bitcoin scene, I saw podcasts that started after me. And just for context, I do it now 1 year.
Yes.
They started after me. They started with a lot of energy, 3 times a week. Then after the first few weeks, they're like, oh, wait, sponsors are not coming from themselves, and the guests is also
Yeah.
hard work, and you have
Yeah.
to put in consistent work every week and sometimes every day to keep
Yeah.
it going. And there are rough patches, and it's all like stressful, and it's not
Yeah.
just like 2 people talking. It's fun, and you get all that money. Um, and then they see, and then the proof of work is like not consistent anymore, and you get distracted, and maybe you get a job offer and you get away from that, or you get distracted in another sense, or you just really bad with it, and you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of work to actually build something that is sustainable over time and can is sustainable for you and maybe even like a
Yeah.
team behind you.
Yeah.
And the same thing I think applies to everything. That's why I like proof of work and the Bitcoin ethos and mindset so much, because if you have nonviolent communication and you work on yourself for communication and everything else, it's not like, oh, like I visited one seminar, now I know how it is and I don't
Yeah.
have to do anything. Even the best communicators always have to work on their communication and never have to stop with that. Like the consistent, like every week, every day,
Yeah.
every month, every year, getting better and stuff like that. It never stops. Like you always can improve something. And if you're not enhancing, if you're not improving, you're stagnating, and that might be fine in some areas. But
Yeah.
if we talk about something so difficult like communication, you probably should work on it, because maybe you fall back in bad habits and you fall back in old behaviors and stuff like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you don't see the challenge with especially nonviolent communication is you don't see the changes immediately. And just to compare again to getting into Bitcoin during a bull run, you immediately see number go up within a day or within a week. It's like, yeah, it's working, it's happening. Okay, diamond hands. Yeah, diamond hands are easy during a bull run, but because that's when most people get in, they have that dopamine rush and the hit and the validation. This is working. This is good. This is great. And it's kind of easy. They don't really have to put in the proof of work initially. Whereas with nonviolent communication, there is no dopamine hit at the beginning. It takes weeks, months, sometimes a year. It depends how consistent you are with your practice as to how quickly you will see the changes. If you dive in and you do your daily journaling and your daily practice, you will start to see some shifts, I would say, within weeks. But to do anything daily for weeks, like you were just pointing out with the podcasts, that takes already so much proof of work that in general, people don't, for whatever reason, I think we're part of a throwaway society. I think proof of work used to be common in our world. Everything only came by proof of work back in the day. And now that we have the disposable society, things just come. They're easy come, easy go, and proof of work has become the rarity in the world. So yeah, fascinating. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. Maybe on that note, how has Bitcoin impacted your life?
Wow. Well, like so much, it's quite mind-boggling, really, for me. I think teaching me, I think even the concept of proof of work, I had never fully even grasped that. Like, I didn't use that term when I was doing nonviolent communication before. I was just doing it, and I was very incentive. My incentive to do it, like I said, was my kids, and I loved them more than anything in the world, and I wanted to communicate with them well and model good communication and healthy relationships with them. So I had a strong incentive, but I didn't understand that that was proof of work. I didn't understand sort of incentives in that sense. I didn't understand first principles. I didn't even understand private property. It really helped me to understand the value of private property. I was sort of this sort of idealistic, egalitarian, we can all be equal and we can all have the same stuff and all of this complete, mindset that I now understand is just so kind of built in the clouds and not at all grounded in reality. And so it's really taught me about proof of work. It's taught me about the value and the necessity to understand and honor and how important private property is. It's there's so many things. I'm just trying to find words really. I mean, it's taught me that I can have really great relationships and learn a lot from people that I would have never given the time of day to in my life before, because we share this fundamental understanding now about the importance of sound money and integrity at the base layer of that. And because we share that and decentralization, immutability, scarcity, like these fundamental core properties, and we understand the importance of them, it's like I can now trust you as a person, not you, but someone, right? Well, you too, but like who I might have different political or social views or cultural views or thoughts, and yet it's so crazy to me, but like I can honor and allow you to have all of that because I know that you are going to honor and allow me to have mine, and we're not going to try and change each other, but we're not going to mess with each other either. And we're just going to let each other be, and we can still transact. And I don't know, to me, that's really profound. And so, like, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater like I used to. Even with NVC, I was still I was still judgmental in the sense of like, oh, no, I don't agree with your views about that. So now I'm not going to give you the time of day or try and listen or understand other things that you're saying. I'm not talking about someone personal in my life. No, that I would do because I want to have those good relations. But I'm just talking about, people in the media or people in this case on Twitter Spaces or, it's really opened me to be able to connect with a vast, more huge segment of society, which actually, I guess, takes me to that point of where Bitcoin will bring peace to Earth in that way. Never mind just by defunding war, largely, but by allowing humans to communicate and learn from each other who before would not have been open to learning from each other. So I think those are some of the biggest ways that are coming off the top of my head right now. Obviously also just the very basic things with Bitcoin, like simply the ability to send money to anybody anywhere. I mean, that's just so incredible. And that just brings a measure of ease to one's life on a daily basis when you need or want to do that. That's profound. Or if I want to donate to a project or to something fantastic that I see happening in the world, I can just do it with no middleman, no intermediary, no need to ask permission. And it's instant. And, of course, there's all of those, properties that we all love about Bitcoin. But yeah, I think those three things I mentioned before are some of the most profound for me that are coming right now.
It's interesting. You also wrote a book. It's super interesting. I love the book title, "The Simplest Bitcoin Book Ever Written." How did you come to that conclusion?
You mean to that title?
Yeah,
Or to
the title, and maybe also what inspired you to even write that book in the first place.
Yeah, the book, and I have mentioned this, excuse me, on a couple other pods. I won't go into it too much, but basically I decided a couple of years ago that I needed to tell everybody that I knew about Bitcoin, like more than I had before, because I'm not living in the same place I lived for a long time. And so I wasn't seeing the people that I knew well on a daily basis anymore. And I thought, well, I should just write an email and just kind of explain everything to everybody, and they can take it or leave it, but at least I've done my part to kind of share what I've learned. Because I've been down the rabbit hole now almost 8 years. So I learned a lot. I had learned a lot, and I thought it was time to really share it. And so I started the email, and it just went on and on and on and on. And I thought to myself, nobody's going to read this. I have to make this readable somehow. So I went back and I made bullet points and tried to break it into sections. I thought, okay, well, that looks better, and then I kept writing, and then I was just like, nah, this is too long. This is actually a book. And that's literally how it happened. And I just copy and pasted that entire email that I never sent into a Word document and just kept going. So that's how it came about. And then the title, I don't know, it literally just came to me in a flash. And I just thought, okay, that's it. I'm just going to call it that, because I don't know, it was literally that. And of course, my husband laughed when he read it. He's like, there's no way this is the simplest book ever written. And he's like, this is not simple. And I'm like, well, okay, you write the simplest book ever written then. To me, this is pretty darn simple. I feel like I'm just introducing all the different aspects, angles, concepts, some of the, monetary history, like some of the basic tech. I felt like I was doing it as simply as I could. And then also part of the title refers to the way the book is laid out, which you can see as just bullet points, and they're like orange little Bitcoin bees. But so they kind of make things stand out, and there's not too many words on a page. There's a lot of space. I had this idea of making it like this. Once I started actually doing the book, right, continuing that email, I had this idea of making it one of those books you could pick up, and open onto any page and find something valuable, find like a nugget of information that you could digest for the rest of the day without having to read like the whole chapter. So that was my idea of how I wanted to approach it. And yeah, it's been downloaded probably like over 3,000 times now, because it's been always a free download available on the website. It still is. And then yeah, I've sold, I guess, almost 1,000 copies of, and given away 2 copies of the paperback. Yeah, and it's on sale right now for this month on the
Really cool,
website.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's super interesting to have the simplest Bitcoin book ever written. I like that idea. I mean, there is, we really have to make it more simple. I think if we Bitcoiners are really good in complicating stuff and getting stuff working, and I think we have to get better to explain Bitcoin in an easier way. We relied in the first 15 years on the financial incentive for people to get it. We just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I have fun staying poor. And that strategy actually works. Like, because if you say that to someone and it's like, hey, you can adopt Bitcoin now or you buy it later for way more money. If that person keeps that in his head and then 3 years later he actually sees the Bitcoin price running up like 2-3x, he's like, oh shit, like maybe he's right.
Yeah.
So the financial incentives allows us to be bad educators, but I
Right.
think we should be great educators and should be better in it to even accelerate the trend and even accelerate that. But even if we're all bad educators, Bitcoin will still exceed just because of the financial incentive that it gives everyone. So I like the idea of simplifying Bitcoin, of simplifying things and getting it to more people's hand. That's what all good Bitcoiners should try to do. At the end of the day, get Bitcoin to as many people as you possibly can, because that's how you actually improve the world. As we
Yep.
also said, Bitcoin leads to so many great things, and I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yes, yes, yes. Yep, no, I agree. And I think fortunately there are many, many educators working, tirelessly, most of us just voluntarily, on different types of education, strategies, platforms. There's the Plan B network. There's so many. And yeah, to continue to simplify it
Absolutely,
is
we have to be
definitely
on
a
that
goal.
journey.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually working on, I've just started sort of reaching out to some devs. I'm going to start, it's not really a podcast, although I'll probably release it. I'm going to start it as spaces on Twitter and then streamed on Nostra and maybe Zapstream and so on. And then I'll record them and potentially put it out as a podcast. And my idea is to have each week a developer from a project. So whether it's Zeus app or Blue Wallet or Phoenix Wallet or any of the hardware signing devices, the actual tools that we use to Bitcoin with to store and secure our Bitcoin, um, and have them walk us through, like I will be act like a beginner and invite people who want to listen who have never used this tool before, and we all go through it together. So then, like, we download the app, we open the app, okay, we click here, we do this, and then I ask the developer questions as I go. We go into the settings to kind of understand a little more about what's there, because I think a lot of times people just, you know, download an app and they like use send and receive, and they don't really know anything else about what the app is capable of or what would be useful for them to know. So that's something that I want to do to contribute to the space, is bring some more of the like information around the tech that's available and that we use. But some people use, a lot of people don't yet, and maybe they're intimidated. Make it very beginner friendly, but also intermediate friendly. So that's not necessarily simplifying what Bitcoin is, but it's simplifying the tools that are available to us. So yeah, I'm excited about that actually, because I don't think there's enough emphasis on that in the space.
100% agreed with that. Really, really cool. The time flew by really
Yes.
quickly. And I think I have to think about maybe doing the podcast longer, but I try to keep it at like 1 hour. But
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
saw that my podcast get longer sometimes. I have one question that I always ask my guests is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin? And we talked so much about something else than Bitcoin today. I will flip that question today just a little bit. What can we learn from you on Bitcoin, which might be surprising, or what was hard for you to grasp in the beginning? Like what was like one thing that you want to share that you learned with Bitcoin about something?
I think I've sort of said the things. Yeah, I'm not having something that I learned about Bitcoin that was surprising to me. Well, it wasn't, I learned it from Jeff Booth, I guess, just the idea that when you have sound money that's scarce, that has a hard cap supply, and and that is in a world that is technologically advancing, that prices will continue to go down. I think for me, that's something I'm still actually trying to wrap my head around that. But that is just something that completely surprised and fascinated me that I'd never thought about before, could never have imagined would be possible. And I'm still working on actually understanding that in a way like I couldn't explain that to a 5-year-old yet. And I feel like I should be able to, but I can't.
It's a hard concept, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, do you know what an NPub is and what it is used for?
An NPub in Nostr?
Yeah, he was going for
Yeah.
the Nostra
Yeah.
NPub.
It's your Nostr public key for sure. And it's the key that you use. Like in Bitcoin, you've got your public and private key, and the public key in Bitcoin generates your addresses, your receive addresses. In Nostr, your NPub is it's like your Nostr address that you can give to people to find you in the Nostr ecosystem. And so, yeah.
Did you include Nostra into the book?
Yes, in the second edition, there's a whole chapter on Nostr that I think is a pretty simple overview. I would love to hear your or anybody else's feedback on what you think of it. But I did, that was one of the reasons I did a second edition, which was released in July of this year and actually was the best-selling book at Nashville at the official merch booth. So that was surprising to me and lovely to hear. But the reason I did it was to update all the numbers and stats and the inflation numbers and things like that, because I have some of that in the book, and then was to add a chapter on Nostr, because to me, Nostr is to communication is to freedom of communication as Bitcoin is to freedom of transaction. So, yeah.
That's a I love that you included Nostra in the book. I think it's something that we should learn with Bitcoin. It should not be the first thing, probably. Like it should be a little bit later than that. But I love that you put it in there. I think
Mm-hmm.
Nostra is a really important stepping stone in scaling Bitcoin to the masses. And I hope that
Mm-hmm.
Nostra is successful. I'm still not convinced that Nostra will be successful to the same extent that I'm very certain that Bitcoin is successful and will be successful. But I hope that Nostra will be successful and is that future communication layer that we can use online and use to transact our thoughts with, if you say so.
Our thoughts and our Bitcoin. I really hope it succeeds, because if we don't have a free way to interact online, how are we going to transfer our Bitcoin with people that we've never met?
Oh yeah, like I'm totally sold on the idea that we will have a technology like that.
Okay, you're just
I
not sure
just
it'll
don't
be that
know
one.
if
Yes.
if Nostra will be that. So
Gotcha.
we the internet allows us for free communication, and we kind of we kind of got away from that path in the past
Yes.
like a few years,
Yeah.
and we have to get back on there.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of hope for that. Like
Yes.
I'm very certain that we will get there, but I just don't like, I didn't research Nostra deep enough to have the conviction and say Nostra is the way to do that. But I probably should. I also got too late into Bitcoin with 2020.
Right.
I'm a late maturity. Man, maybe
Uh-huh.
early maturity. I don't know. Yeah,
Yes,
really
still
cool.
early.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very early. Thank you so much, Keysa, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and read more about your amazing insights?
Thank you. Yeah, on Nostr, I'm at. I usually use Damus app, but an easy way to find me is either on Damus at Simplest Bitcoin Book, and on Primal I'm primal.com/Keysa. That's Keysa. And then Twitter, I'm Simplest BTC Book. And my website is thesimplestbitcoinbook.net. And it's a very basic website. It's a bit of disarray right now. I'm working on it, as you will easily see if you go there. But the book is available for free as a download, the second edition. And the first edition is available as a free download in Spanish and in Brazilian Portuguese. And I guess I'll quickly say that my goal is to have 21 translations by the end of next year. So if you would like to translate the book, anybody, please, please, please reach out. I currently have a few translations in the works, but definitely looking for a lot more.
Absolutely, really cool. Let's
And
let's educate the world with that, and let's translate the book as in 42 languages.
yes, thank you.
Let's shoot higher for that. Really cool. Thank you so much, Keysa, for being on. Thank you so much also for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye bye.